Hi all. So this session is going to be very interesting, a conversation. Product management and starting companies, right? They are considered the most exciting places to be in India today, essentially. And I have two very, very senior leaders, one an entrepreneur and another a very senior product leader to really drive this conversation. On my left is Evelyn. She's the CEO and founder of my Ava. And on my right is Malthi S. She's a very senior product leader and right now is teaching at multiple B schools, the skill of product management. So we'll kick off this session with a quick question to Evelyn. Evelyn, could you share your journey of being an entrepreneur and a founder of a company? How did you go about it? How did you come to this decision?
Sure. So, hey everyone, lovely to see the turnout. I'm Evelyn, the founder of my Ava, as Ujwal said. It's a women's health and wellness platform, essentially making women's health more inclusive, looking at more problems that women face rather than just pregnancy and period health. There are a ton of problems that we face. We're complex beings with complex hormones. So right from puberty to post-menopause is what we look at. And if I had to kind of share my story of how it started, it would sound really cliche. Comes from a personal story. Essentially, I had a terrible accident and I was bedridden for a year, during which I developed a condition called PCOS. Any women with PCOS in the crowd? Fantastic. Huge shout out to you guys. We are really kind of wading it through, right? So PCOS is a condition that affects women in the reproductive age, affects multiple different things like your period cycles, you have a ton of hair loss, etc. Completely complex condition, and I kind of got diagnosed with that particular condition because I was completely bedridden. There was no movement around and stuff like that. So I started researching. So I have about 12 years of experience in the healthcare industry, and I kind of started researching about how many women are facing this, what are the solutions out there. And unfortunately, I found 1 in every 5 women facing the condition, but no solutions existing. So that's when I said, okay, let me at least connect with women who are facing this condition, right? And that was the birth of a community being created for women with PCOS. Essentially talk to women worldwide, not only in India. Anybody who used the hashtag PCOS, we just reached out with 5 questions. Essentially, we is just me laying around on bed and kind of reaching out to these people, talking to them of how they were diagnosed, what is kind of making them, survive another day with the condition. And they started sharing their story, which was so empowering, and we kind of grew to a community of about 8,000 members very quickly. And everybody kind of started reaching out to us saying, can you connect us to a good gynecologist, right? And that was essentially the birth of my Ava, the company or the product that you will see today, which is we created a support system of a doctor, nutritionist, a fitness coach, looking at it in a more holistic angle, and offered that as a solution to the women who were on the platform. Yeah.
Very inspiring. And Evelyn, we were earlier talking about how you created a community-led approach in my Ava. Could you talk a little bit about my Ava in terms of the overall customer experience and building the product as well?
Yeah, I think customer experience comes at a much later stage. I think it's first understanding the problems of the user, right? You're just trying to soak in the day-to-day living of a women with a particular condition. That's all you're trying to do initially. And if you've missed that step, you are bound to fail when you take feedback for customer, from the customer for the product, right? So I think that has been a wonderful journey because we always started with a premise of having a community built around this whole thing. So it was always to understand women who were having this condition, put them together, and see what they're conversing about, which would give you a very good sense of what are the kind of challenges and challenges that they're facing, right? And how do you solution for it? So our customer research, as they call it in the product management language, involved very basic talking to these women, picking up the call, talking to them, and just asking them how their day was and what was the main struggle because of this underlying condition that they had. What did they find really difficult to do or easy to do? What is one thing that they would have changed about their day-to-day, right? So this is like a very basic conversation that you're having, and we said, hey, we have 10 other women who are facing exactly what you're facing. Why don't you come and talk to them as well? So, we kind of put them together, and that we didn't start out saying that we want to build a community. But looking at all the conversations that were happening, this is amazing, right? These are women, especially, who were feeling very alone through the journey. Though they had wonderful partners, they had people in their family who were supporting them, they were feeling very, very alone, because only when you have another person who's facing the same thing, they really understand what you're going through, right? So just putting them together and kind of created that as a central pillar of whatever we're doing right now.
So great to hear. And with that, Malthi, I'll turn over to you. If you can talk a little bit about your career in product management, and especially about some of the points that Evelyn was talking about, getting to customers and building customer empathy and evolving the product. So would love to hear from you as well.
Yeah, sure. I think it was a brilliant story. Thank you, Evelyn, for sharing that. So my experience of product management or building products is probably equivalent to many of your age. I've been in the industry for about 22 years. And I started my career back in 2000 as a developer and as a SAP developer, right? And continued being an engineer, rose up the things. And then I made this transition from product development to product management without really knowing what product management was all about, right? It was all, I think that sync up was that I was a program manager or a project manager, and only thing I knew was that, okay, PM to PM. Okay, so that was the transition that I had. But I think one of the, just taking, one of the key points that Evelyn talked about, my evolution in terms of building my craft has been majorly community-led, right? Because when I took up this role, first of all, this was a brand new role, which was a global role in SAP Labs India at that point of time, back in 2009. And my CPO had just retired, so my manager said, okay, go and figure out how do you want to define the scope of your product. So for me, the savior at that point was some of these community meetings that would hold up. Right? And I would be there every Saturday attending a lot of these community meetings, just trying to figure out, okay, what does really product management means? What are different people who are doing product management? What are they doing? So that was my learning. And I think I never stopped learning, and I never stopped loving building products. And I continued to do that for the next 14, 15 years. And during my transition, in my quest to learn how product management is done across multiple organizations, I transitioned from my role from SAP to EMC to Intuit, a brief stint with Societe Generale, and my last stint as Director of Products was at PayPal, where I used to head the payments platform team. And very recently, April this year, I decided to hang up my corporate boots. And I have been associated with NASSCOM, and that's how I know Ujwal very closely, is that I started to contribute to NASSCOM as a volunteer about 4 years back to product skills and Deep Tech Club as a mentor to startup. So I think during my time at Societe Generale, they have an accelerator program, and I think I have always worked in MNC. I have never worked in a startup. So very, very contrasting personas over here. So I really used to read a lot about it, and I wanted to learn, okay, what is that I can do in order to contribute and be a part of that hustle, right? And that's when I started to mentor startups. And in my last 4 years, I have had 2 interactions on healthcare. I have done logistics, edtech, and I kind of resonate so much with what Evelyn said, because there is another startup with whom I very briefly consulted with them. They were basically targeting women who were going through menopause, right? And nobody understands that, believe me. I'm an example of that. Me and my husband fight every day that we should not put the AC. Even in this weather, I do put ACs because you have all the hot flashes. Right? So I actually saw their MVPs were basically WhatsApp groups where they had those women of that age group, and how true, how real the problem was, right? And I'm so happy where I recently saw their update that from those 200 women, they have actually reached to 40,000 women across India. Yeah? And that's marvelous. And very recently, I started to engage with a very young startup started by 3 psychologists called as Mind. So they started, this is a mental wellness startup, and they started providing online counseling, basically more focused on pocket friendliness and to the students, because last 2 years has not been easy for anybody of us. And definitely students have gone through a lot of transition, right? And I'm so glad. I mean, while they are still studying, they managed to, in their platform, do up to 1,000 sessions and very, very organically grown. And now they are definitely looking to disrupt more and know more about, go more into the technology space. So I've been working with them for the last 1 month. And apart from that, after I decided to hang my boots, now I teach at a couple of B schools and I mentor a couple of other startups. Yeah, so that's what my journey is. And coming to customer research, right? I mean, I think we have kind of talked about a bunch of these examples, right? You don't get into the solution space where the solution is your product. It's one of the reasons some of the very, very strong product-first companies, if I can name like Amazon, PayPal, Intuit, SAP, where I have worked, and I have seen the passion, whether you are at a junior product manager level or you are a CPO, is that passion to really understand your customer. So in order to really understand that what do I build that actually solves a problem for my customer in the most simplest way is actually to thrive in that problem space. So if you are building a startup, if you are an aspiring product manager, the one key message I would say is that don't rush into building products. You really need to, I mean, she spent so much of time just to understand what is the kind of problem? You need to peel down layer after layer. There are, thankfully, being in the internet space, we all have access to humongous number of YouTube videos. We have so many influencers who talk about, so there is a lot of gyan out there, right? So go and seek that gyan, but at the same time, be ready that there is just a foundation that you learn this much. But when you go out, you build a product, you go and spend time with your customers. There are so many aha moments that you will have when you spend time in their space, when you just observe them, when you ask questions to them. So developing that customer empathy is very, very, very important. So never jump into the solution space. And one thing which I really want to add is that for all my products, except of course what I do with the startups, I have been a remote product manager. That just adds much, much more layers of complexity. And COVID was no easy, because that means I cannot travel to North America to go and meet my customers, right? So a very, very important aspect is that figure out anything and everything that you can know to stay in touch with your customers, right? So that is really, really important. And it is not only the job of your product manager to be empathetic to customers and learn how customers use the product or what are the customer products. You need to take your entire team. You need to figure out how your developers can participate in some of those care support calls, how your developers can have an understanding of how customers are using their product, right? So that is the only way you can build a fantastic product.
Well, thank you, Malthi. So Evelyn, building on what was just now shared by Malthi, right? What was interesting when we were speaking earlier was the challenges you faced in, even after customer research and really deeply doing all of the work you did in understanding your core audience, the toughness and challenges of raising funding for your startup, right? So could you share that experience? It's really, really very interesting.
Sure. So I think one thing that I knew for sure that I'm not going to kind of start something just to kind of raise funds, right? That fund had to have some meaning to it. Where do I need it? Why do I need it, right? But when we find it, and that's why I kind of took the route where I'll talk to women, at least get 100 women on the platform for the program plan, create a community of at least 1,000 women who are kind of a part of the whole community, right? So that's what we did. We actually sold program plans. We were revenue generating even before we started fundraising, right? So which was enough validation in my mind that people do need a solution, one. Second, we can make money out of this, right? So these were two things that I started with, and then I kind of ventured out, scouting for funds. And we got responses from a couple of people. It took some time for people to understand periods and PCOS. That aside, but we usually, I think I entered rooms full of men, and these were Zoom rooms, which were also not quite friendly to kind of talk to people virtually. They were a room full of men because on the VC world also it's mostly male dominated, right? So I would just kind of spend 15 minutes explaining what a menstrual cycle is, how does it work, what does irregular periods mean, what is PCOS, and they would just be perplexed with the whole problem that we're trying to solve, right? Luckily enough, there were some investors who went back and did their homework and talked to women in their family, talked to women, doctors probably who they knew, and kind of tried to find, is this a valid problem? And that's how we kind of were able to raise our first check, because after every call I would be like, yeah, this is gone. This is of no value, because they just got to go not understand what we're solving for and just not come back. But fortunately enough, there were a few who did kind of go and kind of do their research and come back and kind of approach us again and say that now we understand what you're building. And there are at least 5 women in my family who have this, and I did not know it, right? So that was quite an eye-opener. So yeah.
Well, and it's interesting that the feasible, valuable, desirable connect you had made, right? And you still were struggling to explain that this is a real viable market. And I think you were alluding to this earlier. In terms of global markets versus India, what's your sense of is there a gap there in terms of the availability of business models?
Yeah, so I didn't have any experience of entrepreneurship. I did not come from an understanding of what an investor is going to ask, or what answers do I need to be prepared with, right? But after like 4 or 5 meetings, the most common question was, is this done in the West? Is there a company that's done it in the West? And what's the kind of product that they build? What's the kind of money that they made? And I'm like, I just looked at the 1 in 5 women who are having PCOS in India, and I'm building for them. You want me to go and ask women out of India who are kind of building for them? So it was quite a funny thing for them to kind of say. I'm like, no, I have 1,000 women from India. I'm going to sell in India first. I've interviewed women in India, and these are the problems that they're facing. And it's a valid, kind of problem, and we've shown revenue. It's not that we've not shown revenue. At the end of the day, you're a for-profit organization, and investors are in the business of making money, so that's what they care about. And we said we have this also. We're not an on-paper idea. But that somehow didn't seem to convince, and I have mails that I've written to investors saying, be a little more gutsy, please. Try to take this challenge like I have taken the challenge of leaving my job and starting this, right? I did kind of talk to, obviously, kind of kindly just put it across there. But that's a challenge you face when you're kind of trying to build something new, which is not tried before, because I'm sure a lot of the women here have heard about at least 20, 30 companies now in the whole PCOS space, right? But we were the first ones to start at that time when PCOS was called PCOS by people because they could not pronounce it. So they just said PCOS, and they could not really relate to it. So that's a very common thing that you'll face when you're trying to disrupt something, or the favorite word of the startup ecosystem, disrupt things, right, and change the world. But I think you've just have to have the gumption in what you're doing. And since it was driven from a very personal space, the problem of the other 1,000 women facing it also became my problem. So if it's driven from a very well understanding of the space exists and I need a solution for it, you can definitely fly with it. So you have to have the gumption for it.
Thank you. And I think, Malthi, we were talking about with Evelyn earlier about this very big word called diversity right now, right? And we all believe in it. But in practice, it doesn't play out the same way that we perceive it when it's spoken of, right? So could you both share your experiences, either of you, to start with, in terms of, how do you perceive this whole diversity push and how it is actually translating on the ground?
Sure. Take it away, Malthi.
So I think I would say probably, going back to the last statistics, at least in the organization that I was working in, I think largely in women in tech, I think the discrepancy is still pretty high, right? But thankfully, given in products, you usually find a lot of cross-functional, people coming from very diverse background. So largely, it is better as compared to women in tech. But to be honest, I mean, if I just go back to a very popular set that a woman, when she looks at a JD, unless she matches 10 on 10 requirements which are listed there, she will not even apply for the job, right? In my own experiences, I have kind of built product teams from scratch across my various organizations. And if I'm hiring 5 product managers, I would at least like to have 1 product manager in my team. But believe me, it is really difficult, right? I really haven't seen probably the women are very critical about, even applying for these things. So even getting that funnel, enough resumes in that funnel has been a challenge. So I would say it is definitely getting better, but we still are very far from, where we should be as a gender equal world, probably an ideal world. But yes, I think a lot of things like, for example, are we having enough women founders? I think it is, globally, it is less than 1% funding actually goes to ventures for which you have women entrepreneurs, right? So I think the good thing is that there are a lot of forums, there are a lot of programs which are now coming up, which are looking to see what is the kind of specific help, what is the kind of nurturing that is needed for these kind of ventures which are coming up. So it is getting better, but I would say that a lot of that, the women need to have a self-talk and push themselves that it is okay even if you're not 100% matching that JD, but just get out of yourself, because almost 50% of the learning happens on the job, right? So just go for it.
Yeah, I think I'd like to share two sides of that same story, right? So I think one, on the whole, having less than 1% of the funding going to women-founded companies, that's so true because of both sides, right? Lesser number of VC women at the table. They don't understand what you're doing, right? And this is specific to femtech, what I bring. Actually not, right? Even fintech, for example, it's understood to be that more men kind of are better at fintech companies, but it's the complete opposite, right? All of us have had moms in our house that have managed the entire finances of the house. They're so fantastic at what they do, right? So that's why you will see a lot of lesser companies also being funded. And as women, I think we don't really grab the opportunity, right? It's us taking a kind of seat back and saying that, oh, maybe not, maybe I'm not qualified enough. Maybe I don't have all the skill set, right? Like somebody earlier was mentioning, one of the speakers, that I'm not a tech person. I don't know how to code. And I think, I've always been told that coding is just a language. Don't worry about it, right? You learn about it. So I'm an engineer, but I never coded, right? So we need to understand that you don't have to sit back and say that I'm not worth XYZ, right? Get up and kind of give it a shot, right? I have no entrepreneur background. Nobody in my family did it, right? But I was like, okay, I'll learn along the way, right? A skill is something that you can always learn, and you make mistakes, you get up again, you kind of learn from them again, right? So I think that's one thing on women as us, is to get up and say that I will at least try. I will at least try, right? I will maximum fail, but I can do something else, right? So that's one thing. The second bias I would like to also bring this is, as a women, as a femtech company, there's a lot of bias that we had, like, because we're dealing with women-related issues, right? So I was like, our salesperson should be a woman. A woman-to-woman talk is, something that all women would like. They would feel comfortable. They would not share too much. And this is a bias that I always had, right? I was like, look at a male name and the resume and just reject them based on that, right? So, and then, one of the person in the sales team actually reached out to me and said, I have this fantastic guy, very good at sales, right? You should really talk to him. And I spoke to him, and he actually schooled me everything about women's health. He's like, ye hota, this is what happens, and this is what I can talk about, and that is what I can talk about. I'm like, this is brilliant. I should give this guy an opportunity, right? And I thought in a week's time, they're going to reach back and say that it's not working out. Women are not sharing stories. They're not comfortable talking with the man on the other side of the phone. But that never happened, right? The women were comfortable. I listened into each and every call. They would share their problems. They would, because they're just looking for somebody to solve their problem. Right, so that bias is not there when it comes to a customer and a salesperson also. So this is also something that we should keep in mind, that it should always be talent that we should recognize, not tokenization. Like a lot of tokenization happens these days is because we need more women leaders. So get somebody who can lead this team and should be a woman. It's just because you need more women leaders, but that's not true. It should be talent that should kind of lead everything, right? So
yeah, but I think there is still a little bit of I would say awareness in the allies and these things, because one of the jobs where I joined, so it was a brand new product team that was formed up. So we were 7 product managers who joined, and I was the only lady. And so my manager said, okay, let me introduce you to, he had come down from the US, and he said, let me introduce you to the engineering leader. And the second engineering leader whom I said, oh, you are that diversity hire, is it? And that was the first line he's telling me. So I just managed to finish that round, and I went back to my manager, and I said, did you have to like compromise on the talent because you wanted to get a representation of women in the same? He said, absolutely not. Please just forget what he said. But yes, it is there on your face at times, and just, you have to deal with it.
Beautiful stories, both of you. So in closing, Evelyn and Malthi, last few thoughts on what motivates you and anything that the audience can take away from your learnings.
No, I think every day is a new day. As product managers, since most people sitting here are either aspiring product managers or are product managers, it's just about solving problems day in, day out, right? We were having this candid conversation earlier that product manager people are very attracted that you're a manager already. But that's not true. Anybody who's a product manager here knows that you are far away from a manager. You're just a person spending 70% of your lifetime trying to convince people about ideas that you have. So, just be at it. Every day is a new day, solving new problems, and just kind of be more attentive and listening more than, kind of trying to solve it without the listening.
Yeah, I would just say the same thing, right? I mean, there is never a perfect time to say, okay, this is the time for me to make that switch, whether it is to that next level, whether it is to change that next role, or just getting into product management. Because product management is all about building it and doing it. So I would just say that don't get stuck up on learning new things and then I will apply it. Just go by as you learn, continue to apply it. And it is definitely not a saying you have to get out of your comfort zone and then only something happens. I was on this fence whether I want to hang my corporate boots or not for almost 3.5 years to say that, okay, will I regret it? What happens to my big fat paycheck? But now that I have been on this exploratory journey in the last 4 months, I think this is one of the best time of my life. So just push yourself. Definitely there is always a calculated risk, but whatever is your aspiration, what is your ambition, just go for it. Take that leap of faith and go for it.
Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you, Malthi. Over to you, Shreya.